The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Let's have a live look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XVX index currently trading at $37,774. Bitcoin is down slightly, almost 3% over the past 24 hours. And the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index is at 2612. ETH slightly up about 88 basis points. And the new DFX CoinDesk's DeFi index is trading at 562. DeFi also advancing almost 6% for the day. And joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Katie Stockton, technical analyst at independent research provider Fairlead Strategies. Welcome, Katie. So we have this Bitcoin daily chart that you sent us, and I see that in the chart you've written down 35,000 support, 42,500 resistance, and a secondary support at 30,000 and support at 30,000 and a resistance at 51K. Maybe you could go over to some of your analysis behind these numbers.
Interesting from a technical perspective. When we saw Bitcoin come down for its third test of that support around 30,000, it was a very widely watched level. And with that, it became what we called ripe for a shakeout, meaning a false breakdown. And indeed, that's what we saw. We saw a false breakdown and pretty much a rip higher off of that successful test of support. Breakdowns in our work require a couple of good closes below an important level. And we really saw that below 30,000. So that supported a longer picture of Bitcoin, a weekly bar chart or candlestick chart, you'll also see that it's a very key support level based on something called the cloud model. But looking at the daily chart, you can see the cloud model was previously a gauge of resistance. It looks like sort of a shadow that had been hanging over Bitcoin. But just very recently, we saw Bitcoin clear that cloud-based resistance. And now we have a couple of important levels in play based on Fibonacci retracements. So not to get too technical here, but if we were to see that 42,500 level cleared decisively, the targeted resistance would become around 51,000 based on the nature of those Fibonacci retracement levels. And indeed, I think that's where Bitcoin is headed. This pullback that's been underway this week, to me, is just a simple retracement that's very natural to see once some resistance is discovered, but the breakout is already there.
Katie, for the kids at home, can you explain what cloud support and resistance is, how it's derived?
So the cloud-based support and resistance, it's derived from a Japanese model called Ichimoku that's become more widely available just using charting software and tools. And it's designed to provide sort of a one big look at price and price action with a gauge of the prevailing trend and also a gauge, of course, of support, which is an area of potential buy-in pressure, and resistance, which is an area of potential selling pressure. The model, without getting too complex here, is derived from midpoints of price. So it's taking a high-low range and taking the midpoint of that range and projecting it forward, not dissimilar from a moving average-based model, which of course moving averages are looking at historical prices and using that as a way to sort of eliminate the noise and isolate the prevailing trend. So that's what the cloud does as well. And for currencies, especially even cryptocurrencies, it tends to hold a lot of relevance as support and resistance. So we've really begun to adhere to this cloud model. And indeed, it's helped us with our Bitcoin call to our subscribers.
So everybody's watching the Ethereum hard fork, and I was just curious what your projections might be for ETH over the short term and the long term.
You know, all the cryptocurrencies tend to stay in lockstep from a directional perspective. So you can trust that when Ether is trending higher, so is Bitcoin, at least over sort of the weekly time frame. Now, we do look at the ratios, so between Bitcoin and Ether, and we've seen very recently with this run up that we've seen across the board, underperformance by Bitcoin. And what we've learned over time is that in a risk-on environment for cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is then seen as more of like a defensive play, something that's a little bit safer, and therein actually tends to underperform, whereas Ether tends to be an outperformer, when cryptocurrencies are in sort of a risk on mode, which indeed has been the case over the past, say, 3 weeks or so since they've seen these successful tests of support. So Ether 2 is testing some key Fibonacci retracement resistance right around 2750, and a breakout above that would target about 3500 as the equivalent level to that 51,000 for Bitcoin.
So, Katie, if you were to assign probabilities, upside or downside over the next, let's say, month or two, where would it be for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say upside seems more likely than downside, based primarily on just the turnaround in momentum and the breakout above the cloud-based resistance levels as providing a positive technical catalyst for both.